Welcome to Trashmagination, a podcast about reimagining trash. I'm Carla Brown. In today's episode, we'll talk about how to creatively reuse fish scales, fish bones, and fish skin. Now, maybe those items are not the materials that you are most hoping to creatively reuse, but this episode is packed with fascinating stories, so I hope you'll stick around. Let's start by talking about fish scales. Fish scales come in a huge variety of shapes. Some scales are harder and some are more elastic. You can even find different types of scales on one fish. Not all fish have scales, or they have such tiny ones that you can't really see them, but they are embedded in the fish skin. Sometimes scales overlap each other, and sometimes they fit together like a puzzle. Scales are made from many materials that are similar to teeth or bone, with layers of substances called dentine, enamel, and keratin. I recently was looking at fish scales through a microscope. I am an assistant scoutmaster, and we were researching how to calculate the age of a fish by looking at the fish's scale. This is a requirement for the Fish and Wildlife Management Merit Badge, which is such a cool merit badge, don't you think? A fish scale has rings similar to tree rings. If the fish lives in the wild, you can see that the rings get closer together during the winter when the fish has less to eat. And then every summer, the rings get wider apart. You can calculate the age of the fish by counting each dark, dense ring. So I went to the fish shop and I asked at the fish counter for fish scales for this project. And they gave me tilapia scales. And it was tricky explaining why I wanted the scales, and I even did it in Spanish. When I looked at the scales under a microscope, I didn't see that pattern of wider and denser scales. And then I realized two things. Tilapia is a fast-growing fish that is often farm-raised. If a fish is farm-raised, it gets food all the time, without a lot of seasonal variation. Also, the reason why tilapia is inexpensive is because it's big enough to eat after only 1 year. So it's just not a very interesting scale to analyze. So I'm going to keep gathering other fish scales for this project and learning more. And in the meantime, if you want to give this a try, I will link to a video in the show notes that explains how to calculate the age of a fish by looking at its scales. If you want to make something from fish scales, you don't have to go to a fish shop. You can buy clean fish scales on Etsy. There is a type of fish called a gar, and there are lots of gar scales for sale on Etsy. I'm guessing it is because they have such a cool shape. It's not a circle or an oval, but more like a diamond. These type of scales fit together like a puzzle rather than just overlapping each other. And Native American peoples used scales from the alligator gar to make arrowheads. Fish scales are also used by artisans who like to sculpt with seashells. This type of work is called shellcraft. One type of shellcraft is called a sailor's valentine, which is a box where the lid is covered with an intricate symmetrical mosaic design where they often incorporate fish scales. The company Real Alaska Jewelry makes fish skin and fish scale jewelry. In their name, the word real is spelled R-E-E-L, and their slogan is He Catches, She Creates, which is about how Mark Walker catches the fish and then Colleen Walker makes the jewelry. The company just celebrated their 1-year anniversary. Next, let's talk about fish skin. In many places, fish skin is delicious. In Hong Kong, fried fish skin with salted egg yolk is sold as a packaged snack. In China, there is a fish skin salad. In Taiwan and Japan, you can eat pickled fish skin. I was born in the 1970s when jellied food was popular. Aspic is a savory gelatin dish often made from fish skin. Some chefs talk about how fish skin can be the most delicious part of the fish if you cook it properly. If you are not into eating fish skin, then maybe you would be more interested in wearing it. Many indigenous peoples from coastal and river regions around the world have been making fish skin leather for a very long time. Janie Chang teaches fish skin tanning classes in British Columbia and online. She made a series of videos showing how she makes fish skin leather. Janie is so excited in her videos because she is processing spring or king salmon, and their skins have a beautiful speckled pattern. It's lovely to see her excitement as she handles this material that many people would just view as trash. In the tutorial video, Janie shows how she really has to scrape with a lot of force to get all the meat off the fish skin. She says it's easier to scrape if you freeze the fish first. It would seem like fish skin would be too delicate, but clearly it is very strong. She takes off all the meaty part of the fish, as well as a layer of membrane right next to the skin. If you leave any of that on the fish, it will rot and give the leather a fish smell. It also keeps the tannins from soaking into the skin, and the tannins are necessary to make it into leather. In her next video, she shows how to tan fish skin with an egg yolk, canola oil, and hand soap. Other artisans make a solution from animal brains, such as deer brains, mixed with water. This method of tanning makes the leather shiny and strong, but it doesn't change the color of the skin. Once she has massaged the fish skin for about 20 minutes, she lays it out flat on a board, and she will massage it periodically over time to keep softening it. After a few days, she'll rinse it, she will re-oil it, and continue with the softening process. In another video, Janie shows how she does bark tanning, which will change the fish skin to a brown color. She makes a tea from the tree bark, or she purchases tannin solutions. She has learned to start with a weaker solution of bark tea and then add the fish skin to stronger solutions over time. The goal is to ensure the tannins have gone all the way to the center of the skin, which can take 1 or 2 weeks. During this soaking process, people soften the skins in many ways by scraping them against a wire or a shell or an antler. In 2012, the Smithsonian hosted 3 artists from Alaska who had each been individually experimenting with making fish leather, and they came to Washington, D.C. to learn from each other and to teach people. They were able to look at the many items that were collected by the Smithsonian that had been made from fish leather, and they shared what they had learned from their own experiments. Unfortunately, when collectors gathered these items, they did not also gather information about how they were made, and a lot of that knowledge has been lost. There is a company called 7 Leagues making boots from fish leather. It was started by Tasha Nathanson, and the boots are not yet available, but the prototypes are beautiful, and hopefully the boots will be available soon. It's possible that more companies will become interested in making fish leather. As you know from my episode on leather made from animal hides is problematic because of the chemicals used. In contrast, fish leather is made with plant-based tannins. You can also make clothing from fish skin. As you know, I love the Irish trash fashion contest Junk Couture. In 2018, the team that won the Most Unusual Material Prize made a vest from fish skin. The name of their entry is in Irish, and I can't pronounce it, but it translates to Plastic Marine Man. Vivian Ross Smith makes tapestries by sewing together haddock skins with big stitches. Vivian is from the Shetland Islands, and she explores the theme of being from an island, or what she calls islandness, through many materials and not only fish skins. She says that people sometimes associate living on an island with being isolated, but she does not find that at all. She said when people live on an island, often their connections with other people run very deep. I was pleased to learn that Vivian did a collaboration with Newfoundland artist Jane Walker on this theme of islandness. Newfoundland is where my family comes from originally. On a personal note, I sometimes wonder if being from an island makes me want to waste less. When it takes so much effort to bring things to the island, or there is nowhere to put waste, it can make you more creative about how you consume and produce things. I first started thinking about creative reuse when I was living on Hornby Island in British Columbia. They were thinking about these issues many decades ago, and they were ahead of their time. Next, let's talk about fish bones. On Etsy, you can buy beads made from fish bones. Some are carved with designs, and some are round and white, made from fish vertebrae. These make great beads because they already have a hole down the middle where the spinal cord goes. When artist Cynthia Gibbon wanted to make a dress out of salmon bones, she did not get her 20,000 salmon bones from Etsy. She gathered the vertebrae from almost 300 salmon. She found them on the beach. She figured out how to make something like a crab pot where she put the beads back in the ocean, and when she pulled the pot out a few weeks later, the bones were picked clean. The bones that she found were from pink, silver, and chum salmon. But as she was working on her project, she realized she needed more bones. So she asked Sitka Sound Seafood if they had more. And they gave her bones from king salmon, which were bigger. And some had spikes on them that needed to be sanded down. Sewing larger bones did speed up her process. She used the smaller bones for the top half of her dress and larger bones for the bottom. One of the big challenges of working with these bones is that they smell of fish, even after the dress was made. But Cynthia says the smell reduces as time goes by. Cynthia designed the dress inspired by the flapper styles of the 1920s. Her dress has a black underlayer, and it is covered by many swooping loops of these bones. There is a video in the show notes called The Bone Dress, where you can see how it looks when it is in motion. Cynthia says she wanted the dress to swish like a fish when you wear it. She made the dress in 2017. It was displayed at the Sitka Wearable Arts Fashion Show, and the dress is now part of the permanent collection at the University of Alaska Museum of the North. Next, I want to talk about how people are upcycling fish scales with high tech. In 2019, Lucy Hughes won the James Dyson Award, which is a design award program for students. She invented a biodegradable plastic made from fish scales and skin. It can compost in a home composter in 6 weeks. It doesn't even require an industrial composter. It is called Marina Tex. Her design won out of more than 1,000 entries. She got the idea after visiting a fish processing plant. She researched the waste streams of the plant and got most interested in fish scales and skin due to their flexibility and protein structure. She then researched materials called binders to hold the product together. She wanted to find a binder that was also organic and came from the ocean, and she experimented with many binders, and she finally found her solution with red algae. Lucy says that more than 172,000 tons of fish waste are produced annually by UK processing plants alone. She was inspired to work on this project because she loves the ocean and is very concerned about the amount of plastic in it. Winning the James Dyson Award will go a long way in helping Lucy bring her plastic to market, but it's not available yet. The next technology can be a huge help to address all of this fish waste. It's called the Power Knot Liquid Food Composter. This device digests food waste in 24 hours right in a kitchen, and it outputs just gray water, which is similar to the water that you create when you wash dishes in the sink. Since the food waste is reduced so quickly, it means that a kitchen can have less space for waste storage. It means workers don't have to transport the waste out into a dumpster, and the restaurant doesn't have to pay for dumpster fees. It also saves a whole lot of carbon emissions from carrying the food to a landfill or to an industrial composter. And the food doesn't sit in a landfill taking up space. It also means there is no rotting food smell. This product is being used by some fish processing plants. It is also popular on cruise ships where space is at a premium, and it's popular on islands where there is a limited landfill capacity. A small one is the size of a dishwasher, and a big one is the size of a car. I didn't want to end this episode about fish parts imagining them getting ground up into gray water, so I'm going to share 2 more stories about creative reuse of fish. There is a type of painting that creatively reuses a whole fish. It's called gyotaku, which is a traditional Japanese form of nature printing. Gyotaku was invented by fishermen who wanted to memorialize a great catch. This was before cameras were invented. In one method, the artist puts ink right on the fish and then they lay paper on the fish to make the print. And in another method, the artist lays wet paper on the fish and then taps ink over the top of it. I will share a wonderful video made by Great Big Story where they interview Naoki Hayashi, who lives in Hawaii and practices gyotaku. Naoki uses water-based paints to make his prints so he can wash off the fish and eat it after the art is made. And of course, there are thousands of artists inspired by the beauty of fish. It was actually challenging to research for this episode because if you search on fish scale art or fish bone art, almost all the results are people who are making paintings and sculptures of fish, but they are not actually creatively reusing fish. It would take me hours to tell you about all the artists who are inspired by fish, so I will just talk about one of my favorites, who is Kate Jenkins. She crochets all kinds of food. When crocheting seafood, she adds sparkly sequins that look like fish scales. She attaches tiny red sequins to lobsters and tiny pink ones to prawns. She crochets little sardines that stick out of a tin. In 2015, she crocheted an entire fish counter with every kind of seafood, all glittering with tiny sequin fish scales. She designed the fish-themed ornaments for anthropology, such as the 3 wise king prawns, which show 3 prawns on a skewer, a fishmas tree, and a lobster holding a sprig of mistletoe. She crocheted a series of seafood dishes for Viking cruises that they display on their ships that look more yummy than even real food. They all feature her signature fish scale sequins. So if the idea of working with real fish scales has no appeal to you, maybe you can be like Kate and work with sequins. Thank you for listening. Please let me know if you have ever creatively reused fish scales, skins, or bones. You can reach me at trashmagination@gmail.com. Until next time, may you see fish scales, skins, or bones as a source of art in your life.